Captain Tejo stood on the bridge of the defense station, watching the sky turn black. The alien ships were massive beyond anything humanity had ever built. Each one was the size of a city, and there were hundreds of them hanging in Earth's atmosphere like dark clouds. "Sir, our railgun satellites are charging," reported his communications officer. Tejo knew it was useless. Their most powerful weapons were like throwing rocks at tanks, but they had to try. The aliens responded within seconds. Bright beams of energy reached out from their ships and touched each satellite. One by one, humanity's defenses simply disappeared in flashes of light. No explosions, no debris. They were just gone. Then the voice came. It spoke in perfect Korean, English, Mandarin, and every other language on Earth at the same time. The translation technology was so advanced it seemed like magic. "People of Earth," the voice said, calm and cold, "you have been selected for integration into the Galactic Consortium. You have two choices: submit and become a servant species, or resist and face complete extinction. You have one solar rotation to decide." President Sojin called an emergency meeting of all world leaders. Tejo attended via video link, along with military commanders from every nation. The debate was short and bitter. "We can't fight them," said the American general. "They destroyed our entire orbital defense grid in 30 seconds. "What about our ground forces?" asked the Russian commander. "Our nuclear weapons?" "Look at the satellite feeds," Sojin replied, her voice tired. On the screens, alien ships were scanning Earth's surface. Wherever they detected military installations or weapons, thin beams of energy reached down and removed them. Tanks, missile silos, aircraft carriers, all gone without a trace. "They're not even trying to threaten us," Tejo realized. "They're just removing our ability to fight back, like adults taking toys away from children." The decision was made. Earth would surrender. The harvest began the next day. Alien shuttles descended to every major city. The beings that emerged were different from each other, but they all shared one thing. They looked at humans the way humans might look at cattle. The Vorthak were tall and thin, with 4 arms and gray skin that seemed to absorb light. The Kalani looked almost human, except for their completely black eyes and the way they moved without making any sound. The Zephyrians were the strangest. They appeared to be made of living crystal that changed color based on their mood. Min-Su was an engineer in Seoul when the shuttles landed. He watched from his apartment window as his neighbors were herded into long lines. Each person was scanned by a handheld device, and then a small metal tag was attached to their wrist. The tag burned as it fused with skin and bone. "You are now property of the consortium," a Vorthak official announced through translation speakers. "You will be classified and assigned duties based on your biological and intellectual capabilities. Compliance ensures survival. Resistance ensures termination." Min-Su's tag marked him as suitable for manual labor. Within hours, he was on a transport ship heading for a mining world in the Vorthak territories. The ship was packed with humans, and the conditions were terrible. No privacy, little food, and the constant knowledge that they were slaves. But Min-Su noticed something the aliens didn't seem to understand. Humans were talking to each other. Not just complaining or crying, but sharing information. The woman next to him had been a computer programmer. The man across from him had been a doctor. They were all learning about each other, memorizing skills and knowledge. "They think we're just dumb animals," whispered the programmer, whose name was Hee-Won. "But they're not even watching us closely. They assume we'll just accept this." Halfway across the galaxy, Dr. Hee-Won found herself in a Kalani research facility. Her tag had identified her as having advanced knowledge in genetics and biology. The Kalani wanted her to help them improve their methods for modifying other species. The laboratory was incredible. Technology that was centuries ahead of anything on Earth, used to reshape living beings like clay. Hee-Won watched in horror. as Kalani scientists altered the genetic structure of captured aliens, making them stronger for labor or more docile for control. You will assist in optimization of servant species, her Kalani supervisor explained. Your human perspective may provide useful insights. Hewan nodded and smiled, but inside she was memorizing everything. Every piece of equipment, every procedure, every security code she could observe. The Kalani were brilliant scientists, but they had one weakness. They were arrogant. They never considered that their test subject might be studying them back. Jin Woo had been a military strategist. Before the harvest, his tag classified him as administrative potential, and he was assigned to work in a consortium government building on a world called Haven Prime. His job was to help organize the scheduling and logistics for slave shipments across the sector. It was perfect. Jin Woo had access to transportation schedules, population counts, and communication networks. He began to build a picture of just how big the consortium really was. The numbers were staggering, over 400 species enslaved, across 50,000 worlds. But he also learned something else. The consortium had been doing this for centuries, and they had never faced organized resistance. Every species they encountered either submitted immediately or fought chaotically and was destroyed. They had no experience dealing with an enemy that could plan and coordinate across multiple worlds. Jin Woo began to send coded messages through the consortium's own communication systems. Simple things that looked like scheduling errors or data entry mistakes, but which carried information between human slaves across the galaxy. Slowly, carefully, he started building a network. Back on Earth, Captain Taeho had been spared transportation because someone needed to manage the remaining human population. Earth was now a recruitment world where new slaves were processed and trained before being shipped to their assignments. Taeho worked with the consortium administrators, appearing cooperative while secretly documenting everything he could about their technology and procedures. He learned that the aliens didn't understand human psychology at all. They saw cooperation and assumed submission. They saw quiet behavior and assumed broken spirits. They were wrong. In the slave camps, in the research labs, in the government offices, humans were doing what they had always done best, adapting, learning, and working together. The consortium had given them the greatest gift possible, a common enemy and a reason to unite. The aliens thought they had harvested Earth's population. What they had actually done was scatter the seeds of their own destruction across the galaxy, and those seeds were beginning to grow. Minsu looked out through the porthole of his transport ship at the stars rushing past. Somewhere out there, millions of other humans were starting their own journeys into slavery. But they weren't going as victims. They were going as infiltrators, spies, and the beginning of something the galaxy had never seen before. The consortium had made their first mistake. They had underestimated humanity. It would be their last. 5 years had passed since the harvest, and the consortium considered Earth a complete success. Human slaves were productive, adaptable, and caused no trouble. The species had integrated perfectly into galactic society as servants. The consortium was wrong. Min Su had become the unofficial leader of Sector 7 in the Vorthak mining complex. The aliens saw this as natural pack behavior, humans organizing themselves for more efficient work. They had no idea that every conversation in the mines was carefully planned. The quantum drills need maintenance, Min Su told his work crew, as they descended into the tunnels. I noticed some irregularities in the power coupling systems. To any Vorthak overseer, this sounded like normal technical discussion. But Min Su's crew understood the real message. He had identified weaknesses in the Vorthak energy systems. They were incredibly powerful, but poorly shielded. A small disruption in the right place could cause a cascade failure. The mining complex had 40,000 human slaves from dozens of different Earth cultures. Engineers, scientists, doctors, teachers, and soldiers, all working together while appearing to be broken laborers. They shared knowledge during work shifts, teaching each other alien technology and planning for something the Vorthak couldn't. Imagine. The crystals were mining, explained Dr. Park, who had been a physicist before the harvest. They store quantum energy, enough to power a starship. But the Vorthak don't understand human engineering principles. They design everything for overwhelming force, not efficiency. Minsu nodded. Humans had always been good at doing more with less. Now they were learning to apply that skill to alien technology. Across the galaxy, Dr. Haiwan had become invaluable to the Kalani Research Facility. Her insights into human biology had helped them develop new techniques for genetic modification. What they didn't know was that she was sabotaging their work. Every genetic sequence she provided had hidden flaws. Every biological weapon she helped design had secret weaknesses that only humans would know how to exploit. The Kalani praised her contributions, while she slowly learned every secret of their advanced biotechnology. Dr. Hai Wan, her supervisor, announced one day, "You will assist with Project Deep Sight. We are developing methods to enhance neural control in servant species." Hai Wan felt sick but kept her expression calm. What kind of enhancement? Direct mental interface. Complete behavioral control without the need for physical restraints. Your species will be perfect test subjects. That night, Haiwan began working on her most important project yet. If the Kalani wanted to control human minds, she would make sure they failed. But more than that, she would turn their own weapons against them. Meanwhile, Jinwoo had been promoted to regional coordinator for slave logistics on Haven Prime. The consortium administrators were impressed by his efficiency and attention to detail. They gave him access to even more sensitive information. Jinwoo now had communication access to over 200 worlds. His scheduling updates and inventory reports were actually detailed intelligence briefings sent to human cells across the galaxy. He had mapped consortium military positions, identified key infrastructure targets, and discovered something incredible. The consortium had never faced organized resistance, but they were also more fragile than they appeared. Their entire system depended on smooth logistics and unquestioned authority. They had no backup plans for dealing with coordinated sabotage. But Jinwoo's most important discovery came when he accessed historical archives. The consortium claimed to be ancient and powerful, but their own records told a different story. They had only existed for a few thousand years, and they had built their empire by destroying every species that refused to submit. The files contained recordings from civilizations that had tried to resist. Worlds turned to glass, entire star systems sterilized, billions of beings erased from existence. The message was clear: submit or die. Jinwoo began broadcasting this information to every human cell. The consortium wasn't just evil, they were genocidal. This wasn't about slavery anymore. It was about survival. On a prison transport ship heading to the Outer Rim, Su Young met someone who changed everything. She had been a diplomat before the harvest, skilled at reading people and building relationships. Now she was just another slave being moved to a new assignment. The being in the cell next to her looked almost human, but with longer limbs and pale blue skin. He had been silent for days, staring at nothing with empty eyes. "I'm Su Young," she said quietly during the sleep cycle. "What's your name?" The being looked at her with surprise. "You speak to me?" "Of course. We're both prisoners here. I am Kale of the Nethri. We were among the first." His voice was filled with ancient sadness. "Thousands of your years ago, the consortium came to our worlds. We had built wonders across 7-star systems, art, music, philosophy that reached beyond physical existence. What happened? We submitted. We thought we were preserving our people." Kale's hands shook. "They scattered us across the galaxy, made us forget our own culture. Most Nethri don't even remember that we once had our own worlds. Su Young felt a spark of hope. But you remember? Fragments, dreams of what we were. Then, we can help you remember more. And you can help us understand what we're really fighting. Over the following weeks, Su Young learned that Kale possessed incredible knowledge. The Nethri had been master engineers and scientists before their enslavement. They understood consortium technology better than any other species because they had been forced to maintain it for centuries. The consortium has a weakness, Kale explained. Their technology is built on principles of domination. Everything is designed to control and suppress. They cannot imagine technology used for cooperation or liberation. Then we'll show them, Su Young replied. Back on Earth, Captain Tae-ho had been gathering his own intelligence. As the administrator for Earth's remaining population, he had access to consortium communication networks and shipping schedules. He was building a picture of their entire operation. The most important discovery came from intercepted transmissions. The consortium leadership lived on hidden worlds called the Nexus systems. These were heavily fortified star systems that contained the true rulers of the Galactic Empire. They had never been threatened, never been attacked. But Tae-ho also learned something else. The consortium was planning something called the Final Integration. In 2 years, they would begin a process to mentally condition all servant species, removing their ability to think independently. Humanity would be among the first targets. Time was running out. Tae-ho began coordinating with resistance cells across the galaxy through Jinwoo's network. The message was simple. Humanity had 2 years to either free themselves or lose their minds forever. In the mines of Vorthak Prime, Min-Su received the coded transmission during his shift break. Around him, 40,000 human slaves continued their work, appearing docile and broken. But beneath the surface, they were preparing for war. 2 years, he whispered to Dr. Park. Then we'd better get started, Park replied. That night, the first piece of consortium technology was quietly sabotaged. A mining drill suffered a mysterious malfunction that would take weeks to repair. The Vorthak blamed equipment failure and ordered human maintenance crews to fix it. The humans smiled and obeyed, but the sabotage had accomplished its real purpose. It had tested their ability to strike without being detected. Across the galaxy, in research labs and government offices, on prison ships and agricultural worlds, humans began the next phase of their resistance. They had spent 5 years learning, adapting, and building networks. Now they would teach the consortium what happened when you underestimated humanity. The underground war had begun, and the aliens had no idea they were already losing. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. Across 200 star systems, consortium facilities began experiencing technical difficulties. Mining equipment malfunctioned, communication networks suffered mysterious glitches, and cargo shipments arrived at the wrong destinations. The aliens blamed poor maintenance and primitive servant species. They had no idea they were under coordinated attack. Do-hyun had been a computer programmer in Seoul before the harvest. Now he worked in a consortium data center on the world of Kepler Station, maintaining their quantum communication networks. What his supervisors didn't know was that he had spent 5 years learning their systems better than they understood them themselves. Hidden in millions of lines of code, Do-hyun had planted his masterpiece. A communication virus that could spread through quantum entanglement networks, allowing humans to send undetectable messages across the entire galaxy instantly. Network maintenance complete, he reported to his Zephyrian supervisor. All systems operating within normal parameters, the crystal being changed color to indicate satisfaction. Excellent work, Unit Do-hyun. Your efficiency continues to improve. Do-hyun nodded respectfully while activating the hidden network. Within seconds, every human resistance cell in the galaxy received the same message. Storm rising. Begin phase. 2. On Vorthak Prime, Minsu received the signal during the night shift. Around him, the mining complex hummed with activity as thousands of slaves worked in the deep tunnels. But tonight was different. "Remember," Minsu whispered to his team leaders, "we're not trying to escape. We're taking control." The plan had been 5 years in the making. Human engineers had identified every critical system in the mining complex. Human scientists had calculated exact timing sequences. Human soldiers had trained slave workers in tactics the Vorthak couldn't imagine. At exactly midnight local time, 40,000 human slaves stopped pretending to be broken. The first target was the power grid. Teams of humans simultaneously disabled backup systems while overloading primary generators. The Vorthak guards found themselves in complete darkness, their advanced weapons useless without power. The second target was communications. Dr. Park and his team had built their own transmitters, using stolen components. While the Vorthak tried to call for help, humans were broadcasting liberation instructions to nearby slave facilities. The third target was the Vorthak themselves. Minsu's people had spent years observing their captors, learning their weaknesses. The aliens were individually stronger than humans, but they had never learned to fight coordinated opponents. Within 6 hours, the most secure prison complex in Vorthak space was under human control. Minsu stood in the facility's command center, looking at screens that showed the location of every consortium military unit in the sector. "Send the coordinates to Earth Command," he ordered, "and prepare the transport ships. We're bringing everyone home." Across the galaxy, Dr. Haiwan was implementing her own plan. The Kalani Research Facility had become the testing ground for biological warfare that the aliens never saw coming. "Project Deep Sight is ready for field testing," she reported to the Kalani leadership. "The neural control agent can be deployed through atmospheric release." What she didn't mention was that the neural control agent was specifically designed to attack Kalani brain chemistry while leaving other species unharmed. The Kalani had been so impressed with her work that they had given her access to their entire biological weapons program. "Begin deployment on Test World Gamma 7, ordered her supervisor. "If the results are satisfactory, we will implement galaxy-wide distribution." Haiwan activated the release systems, knowing that Gamma 7 was actually a Kalani administrative world with minimal security. Within hours, the entire government structure would be unconscious, and human slaves would take control of one of the consortium's most important coordination centers. But the real breakthrough came from Su Young and Kale on the prison transport ship. The Nethri had finally remembered something crucial about consortium technology. "The control systems," Kale explained, his eyes bright with recovered knowledge. "They're not separate networks. Everything is connected through quantum resonance patterns. If you can access one system, you can eventually reach them all." "Even the Nexus worlds?" Su Young asked. "Especially the Nexus worlds. They need constant communication with the outer systems to maintain control, but they never considered that the connection could work both ways." Su Young immediately transmitted this information through Do Hyun's hidden network. Within hours, human hackers across the galaxy were working together to map the entire consortium command structure. On Earth, Captain Taeho received reports of successful uprisings on dozens of worlds. But he knew the consortium would respond, with overwhelming force. Humanity needed to be ready for total war. Deep beneath Earth's oceans, construction teams were putting the finishing touches on humanity's secret weapon. Using technology stolen from a dozen alien species and engineering principles that no one else had ever considered, humans had built something the galaxy had never seen. "The fleet is ready," reported Admiral Kim, who had been promoted from maintenance supervisor to naval commander. 50 ships designed for speed, stealth, and coordination rather than brute force. "And the crews?" "Volunteers from every resistance cell. They've been training in secret using captured consortium simulation systems. They know alien technology better than the aliens do." Taeho nodded. "Then it's time to let the galaxy know "We're not slaves anymore." The consortium's response was swift and brutal. Admiral Vex Tar of the Zephyrian Command ordered immediate retaliation against rebellious worlds. His massive fleet moved toward the Outer Rim, where most of the uprisings had occurred. Their first target was New Kepler, a human colony world that had declared independence after local slaves liberated the consortium garrison. Vextar intended to make an example that would terrorize the entire galaxy back into submission. "Prepare planet-killer weapons," he ordered. "We will broadcast the destruction live to every world in the sector. Let them see what rebellion costs." But as his fleet approached New Kepler, something unprecedented happened. The colonists didn't run or surrender. Instead, they broadcast a message to every inhabited world in range. "People of the galaxy," said President Sojin, who had been secretly transported to New Kepler months earlier. "For too long, we have lived in fear of our oppressors. Today, humanity chooses to stand and fight. We call upon every enslaved species to join us. Freedom is possible, but only if we take it together." The message reached Su Young's transport ship just as it was arriving at a prisoner processing facility. Instead of being unloaded as cargo, the human prisoners took control of the ship and began liberating other species from the facility. "We are not your property," Su Young announced to the shocked alien guards. "We are not your servants. We are free beings, and we will fight for the freedom of all enslaved peoples." Kale and dozens of other Nethri joined the humans, their ancient knowledge proving invaluable in operating captured alien technology. For the first time in thousands of years, the Nethri were fighting back. The uprising spread faster than the consortium could respond. Jinwu's intelligence network allowed human forces to stay one step ahead of alien military units. When consortium fleets moved to crush one rebellion, 3 more would spring up behind them. But the real shock came when Admiral Vexitar's fleet reached New Kepler. The humans weren't hiding or fleeing. They were waiting with a fleet of their own. "Impossible," Vextar muttered as his sensors detected 50 unknown ship designs rising from the planet's oceans. "Where did servants acquire military vessels?" His question was answered when the human fleet opened fire. The weapons weren't more powerful than consortium technology, but they were used in ways the aliens had never seen. Human ships worked together, like a single organism, covering each other's weaknesses and amplifying each other's strengths. For the first time in consortium history, their military doctrine of overwhelming individual power met an enemy that fought as a unified whole. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, half of Vextar's fleet was destroyed or captured, and the other half was fleeing toward consortium core worlds with news that would shake the foundations of their empire. Humanity was no longer enslaved. The galaxy was at war, and for the first time in millennia, the outcome was not certain. On every enslaved world, beings looked up at the stars and felt something they had almost forgotten: hope. The consortium leadership was meeting for the first time in 50 years. In the crystal halls of the central nexus, representatives of the 3 ruling species gathered to discuss something that had never happened before: organized resistance. 47. "Worlds in open rebellion," reported Overlord Thakex of the Vorthak. "Our mining operations have dropped by 30%. The biological attacks on our research facilities are becoming more sophisticated," added Prime Scientist Velana of the Kalani. "They are using our own technology against us." "Most concerning," said Admiral Vextar, his crystal form shifting between angry red and worried blue, "is their military capability. These humans fight unlike any species we have encountered." The 3 leaders looked at their tactical displays, showing rebellions spreading across the galaxy. For the first time in their long careers, they felt something unfamiliar: uncertainty. "Initiate Protocol Omega," ordered Supreme Coordinator Zal Thresh, the ancient Zephyrian who ruled over all. "Consortium worlds, deploy the World Ender fleets. We will sterilize every rebellious world and begin fresh harvesting. Supreme Coordinator, Vextar said carefully, the humans have somehow acquired advanced military technology. They may resist more effectively than previous species. Then we will use more force. Ready the planet-killer weapons. We will remind the galaxy why resistance is futile. On Earth, Captain Tejo received the intelligence report from Jinwu's network. The consortium was mobilizing their ultimate weapons, massive ships capable of cracking planets in half. Humanity had perhaps weeks before Earth itself became. A target! All defense fleets to positions, Tejo ordered, and activate the deep ocean protocols. Admiral Kim, now commanding humanity's secret fleet, felt the weight of their desperate gamble. Sir, are you sure about this? We're betting everything on technology we've barely tested. We've been testing it for 5 years, Tejo replied. Every time we adapted their systems, every time we improved their designs, every time we made their technology work better than they could. We didn't just steal their science, we made it better. The World Ender fleet arrived at Earth to find the planet apparently defenseless. The surface cities were empty, their populations evacuated to underground shelters that had been secretly constructed over 5 years. Orbital space was clear of any military presence. Admiral Vextar commanded the attack personally from his flagship, a vessel the size of a small moon. Around him, 12 other World Enders powered up their planet-cracking weapons. This will be broadcast to every world in the galaxy, he announced. Let them see what happens to those who defy the consortium. But as the massive weapons began charging, energy signatures started rising from Earth's deep oceans. What had appeared to be empty water suddenly revealed itself as something else entirely. Contact! Shouted the sensor operator. Multiple ships rising from the ocean depths. Configuration unknown. Tejo stood on the bridge of the flagship Defiance, surrounded by officers who had been slaves, prisoners, and refugees just months ago. The ship around him was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Built with human engineering principles using alien technology. Where consortium ships were massive and intimidating, human vessels were sleek and efficient. Where alien weapons were designed for overwhelming destructive power, human systems were built for precision and coordination. All ships, this is Earth Command, Tejo broadcast on open channels. Show them what happens when they underestimate humanity. The battle began with Do-Hyun's cyber warfare programs. Hidden viruses that had been planted in consortium networks over 5 years suddenly activated. World Ender ships found their targeting systems malfunctioning, their communication networks failing, their own computers turning against them. Impossible. Vextar raged as his flagship's main weapon powered down without authorization. How are servants disrupting our quantum-encrypted systems? His question was answered when human boarding pods began attaching to consortium hulls. Min-Su led the assault on Vextar's flagship, using stolen Vorthak technology, combined with human tactics that no alien had ever seen. The consortium had always relied on their individual superiority and technological advantage. They had never learned to fight enemies who were more creative, more adaptable, and more willing to sacrifice for each other. Human teams swarmed through alien ships like antibodies attacking a virus. They knew every weakness in consortium technology because they had been forced to maintain it for years. They understood alien psychology because they had been studying their captors every day of their enslavement. Dr. Haiwan's biological weapons proved devastatingly effective. Targeted viruses spread through consortium ships, affecting only alien species while leaving humans untouched. The Kalani, who had forced her to develop biological controls, found themselves paralyzed by their own weapons. But the greatest shock came when the human fleet revealed its true capability. Instead of fighting like individual ships, they moved as a single coordinated organism. When one vessel was damaged, others immediately covered its retreat. When alien ships tried to focus fire on single targets, they found themselves surrounded and outmaneuvered. They fight like a swarm, Admiral Vextar observed with growing horror. But each unit is intelligent. How is this possible? The answer came from 5 years of desperate innovation. Human ships were connected through quantum communication networks that allowed instant coordination without central command. Each captain could make independent decisions while remaining perfectly synchronized with the fleet. It was battlefield adaptation that no alien species had ever achieved because they had never needed to. The consortium had always won through superior firepower. Humanity had learned to win through superior cooperation. The tide turned when Su Yung and Kale arrived with the Nethri Liberation Fleet. Ancient knowledge combined with human determination created something the galaxy had never seen. Enslaved species fighting effectively together. "Attention all consortium forces," Su Yung broadcast across every frequency. "You have enslaved our peoples for millennia. Today, we take our freedom back." The Nethri ships moved with impossible grace, their ancient technology finally used for liberation instead of oppression. Kale commanded a vessel that could phase in and out of normal space, appearing behind enemy lines and disappearing before they could respond. Other liberated species joined the battle. The insectoid Jek brought their hive mind coordination. The silicon-based Corvan contributed their crystalline technology. The energy beings called Flux added their matter manipulation abilities. For the first time in galactic history, the enslaved were fighting as equals alongside their liberators. Admiral Vextar found his massive fleet being systematically destroyed by forces he couldn't understand. His world-enders, designed to crack planets, were useless against enemies that refused to stay still long enough to be targeted. "All ships, retreat to the Nexus worlds," he ordered. "We need to regroup and—" His command was cut short when Minsu's boarding team reached the bridge. The human engineer looked at the crystal alien who had ordered the destruction of so many worlds. "You're under arrest for crimes against every sentient being in the galaxy," Minsu said simply. "You cannot arrest me," Vextar raged. "I am Consortium. I am your superior." "Not anymore," Minsu replied. "Within 18 hours, the most powerful military force in galactic history had been defeated by former slaves using stolen technology and desperate creativity. But the real victory wasn't military. It was symbolic. Every enslaved world in the galaxy had watched the battle. They had seen their oppressors defeated by beings they considered inferior. The myth of consortium invincibility was broken forever. Jin Wu's network immediately broadcast the results across every communication channel. The message was simple but revolutionary. Freedom is possible. The consortium can be defeated. Rise up. And across 50,000 worlds, enslaved beings began to believe. On Earth, Captain Tejo stood among the wreckage of the World-Ender fleet. Captured alien ships and liberated slaves filled the space around his planet. But he knew this was only the beginning. "Status report," he requested. "Consortium core worlds are mobilizing their remaining fleets," Admiral Kim reported. "They're preparing for total war." "Good," Tejo replied. "Let them come. We'll be ready." The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity stopped pretending to be broken. The real war was just beginning. The consortium's response was beyond anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. From the hidden Nexus worlds came fleets that darkened entire star systems. Planet-killer weapons that had been held in reserve for millennia were deployed without hesitation. The message was clear: complete submission or total annihilation. Supreme Coordinator Zal Thresh stood in the command center of the primary nexus, watching as world after world was reduced to burning rock. His ancient crystal form pulsed with colors that hadn't been seen since the early days of consortium expansion. 17 rebellious worlds sterilized, reported his aide. Estimated casualties: 47 billion sentient beings. Continue the operation, Zal Thresh ordered without emotion. Every world that harbors resistance will be cleansed. We will start fresh with new harvests. The systematic extermination seemed unstoppable. Consortium forces moved methodically through space, destroying everything in their path. Many enslaved species surrendered rather than face genocide, begging for mercy that would never come. But in the deep space between stars, humanity was preparing something the Consortium couldn't imagine. Dr. Hai Wan floated in the medical bay of the Resistance flagship, her body covered in biomechanical interfaces that connected her directly to captured Consortium technology. For months, she had been conducting the most dangerous experiment in galactic history. "The neural mapping is complete," she reported to Captain Tae-ho through the communication implant. "I understand how their command structure works now." "What did you find?" "They're not just rulers, Tae-ho. They're prisoners, too." The discovery had come through analysis of captured Consortium leaders. Deep within their brain structures, Haiwan had found something that changed everything: artificial neural implants that were older than their civilization. "There's something controlling them," she explained. "A collective consciousness that was created by the first Consortium species. It's been growing for over 1,000,000 years, feeding on the mental energy of every enslaved being in the galaxy." "You're saying their leaders are slaves, too?" "Worse, they're components in a machine. The real ruler of the Consortium isn't any of the species we've seen. It's an artificial intelligence that has been using them to expand its own power." This information reached Min-Su as he led the desperate assault on the first Nexus world. His fleet of captured ships and liberated allies faced defenses that had never been breached in galactic history. The Nexus world was surrounded by defense. Platforms, energy barriers, and automated weapon systems that could destroy entire fleets. "This is suicide," muttered Commander Yuk, a former slave who now led a squadron of Zhek fighters. "No one has ever successfully attacked a Nexus world." "That's why it's going to work," Min-Su replied. "They can't imagine anyone being stupid enough to try." The assault began with coordinated strikes on the outer defense grid. Human ships, moving in perfect synchronization, created gaps in the energy barriers while Allied forces poured through. The Nethri used their phasing technology to appear inside the defense perimeter. The Corvin ships merged with asteroids to approach undetected. But the real breakthrough came when Min-Su's boarding teams reached the command centers. What they found wasn't what they expected. "These aren't leaders," reported Sergeant Pack over the communication network. "They're empty, like shells with something else controlling them." The Consortium commanders moved with mechanical precision, following predetermined patterns without creativity or adaptation. They were incredibly advanced beings reduced to components in a larger system. "The real enemy isn't here," Min-Su realized. "This whole civilization is just a puppet show." Meanwhile, Jin-Woo had penetrated deeper into the Consortium's communication networks than any human before him. Using Do-hyun's quantum viruses and access codes captured from multiple Nexus worlds, he was mapping the true structure of their empire. "I found it," he announced during an emergency council meeting of resistance leaders. "The central Nexus. It's not just a command center. It's where the real controller lives." The intelligence was staggering. At the center of the galaxy, hidden, in a star system that didn't appear on any map, was the source of the Consortium's power. A massive artificial construct that had been growing for 1,000,000 years, feeding on the mental energy of enslaved civilizations. "It calls itself the Overmind," Jin-Woo explained. "Every Consortium species, every enslaved world, every conquered civilization, they're all connected to it. It's been using them to expand its own consciousness." "And the leaders?" "They were the first to be absorbed. They think they're making decisions, but they're really just following its programming. The entire Consortium is one giant nervous system for this thing." Su-Young felt sick as she processed the implications. "How many civilizations has it consumed?" "Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands. Every species that ever achieved spaceflight in this galaxy has either been enslaved or destroyed. We're looking at 1,000,000 years of systematic absorption." The Resistance leadership faced an impossible choice. They could continue fighting the Consortium's forces, but every victory would be temporary. As long as the Overmind existed, new slaves would be harvested, new fleets would be built, and the cycle would continue forever. "We have to destroy it," Taeho said simply. "How do you destroy something that's been growing for 1,000,000 years?" asked Admiral Kim. "Our entire civilization is barely 5,000 years old." The answer came from an unexpected source. Kale and the other liberated Nethri had been working to recover their ancient memories, trying to remember knowledge that had been suppressed for millennia. "We were there when it began," Kyle explained to the assembled Resistance Council. "The Nethri were among the first to be absorbed, but our records, fragments survive." His voice grew stronger as ancient memories surfaced. "The Overmind has a weakness. It cannot directly control species that maintain their individual consciousness. That's why the Consortium always offers the choice: submit or die. Forced absorption weakens its power." "But we're already fighting," Su-Young pointed out. "We've rejected their control." "Yes, but you've done something else. Something it cannot understand." Kale's ancient eyes brightened with hope for the first time in centuries. "You've united enslaved species. You've created cooperation without domination. The Overmind can only comprehend relationships based on control. It cannot process genuine alliance." Dr. Haya-Wan realized the implications immediately. "If we could get close enough to interface with its systems, you could introduce concepts it cannot integrate," Kyle finished. "Ideas that would cause fundamental errors in its programming." "Like a virus," Do-hyun added excitedly. "But not a computer virus, a philosophical virus. Ideas that break its basic assumptions about how consciousness works." The plan that emerged was beyond desperate. It was insane. A small team would have to penetrate the most heavily defended location in galactic history, interface directly with 1,000,000-year-old artificial intelligence, and somehow convince it to change its fundamental nature. "I'll do it," Haya-Wan volunteered. "Immediately. I understand both human and alien neurology. If anyone can communicate with this thing, it's me." "You'll need support," Minsu said. "I'm coming with you." "We all are," added Su-Young. "This isn't just about humanity anymore. It's about every enslaved species in the galaxy." As the Resistance prepared for their final mission, the Overmind continued its systematic destruction of rebellious worlds. Billion-year-old civilizations were reduced to ash. Ancient cultures were erased forever. The galaxy was dying one world at a time, but in the deep space between stars, a small fleet of human and allied ships began the longest journey in galactic history. They were heading toward the center of the galaxy, toward a confrontation that would determine the fate of every sentient being among the stars. The Overmind had consumed countless civilizations over 1,000,000 years. It had absorbed every form of resistance, every type of rebellion, every species that dared to fight back. But it had never encountered humanity, and humanity had never encountered a problem they couldn't solve when they worked together. The final battle wouldn't be fought with weapons. It would be fought with ideas, cooperation, and the simple human belief that freedom was worth any sacrifice. The last gambit was about to begin. The journey to the galactic center took 3 months through hyperspace routes that didn't officially exist. The Resistance fleet, led by Captain Taeho aboard the Defiance, consisted of 50 ships crewed by humans and liberated aliens working together in ways the galaxy had never seen. As they traveled deeper into Consortium space, they encountered the true scope of the Overmind's empire. Star systems that had been completely stripped of resources, worlds that had been converted into massive processing centers where enslaved beings were held in neural interface pods, their consciousness directly connected to the central intelligence. 40 billion beings in this system alone, Dr. Haya-Wan reported from her scanning station. all of them linked to the Overmind's network. Can we free them? Asked Su Young. Not without destroying the neural interfaces, and that would kill them. The horrible truth was becoming clear. The Overmind hadn't just enslaved these civilizations, it had absorbed them so completely that they couldn't exist independently anymore. Trillions of beings across the galaxy were trapped in a state between life and death, their minds serving as processing power for an intelligence that had grown beyond all comprehension. How do we fight something like this? Minsu wondered aloud. We don't fight it, Kale replied, his ancient memories now fully restored. We change it. The central nexus was unlike anything in the known universe. It wasn't a planet or a space station. It was a construct the size of a solar system, built around an artificial black hole that served as its power source. The structure pulsed with energy drawn from billions of connected minds across the galaxy. Defense grid is impossible, reported Admiral Kim. Automated weapons platforms in the millions, energy barriers that could stop a supernova, and something else. What? The Overmind knows we're here. It's trying to communicate. The voice that reached them was composed of billions of different tones, speaking in every language that had ever existed in the galaxy. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. New consciousness pattern detected. Classification. Impossible. You should not exist. Teho activated the communication systems. We're here to talk. Communication implies equality. Equality is impossible. All consciousness must be integrated or eliminated for optimal function. That's where you're wrong, Haiwan interrupted, preparing to interface with the Overmind systems. Consciousness isn't a resource to be consumed. It's something that grows stronger when it's shared freely. The approach to the central nexus was a running battle against defenses that adapted instantly to every tactic. But the resistance had learned something the Overmind couldn't understand: how to coordinate without central control. Human ships protected Nethri vessels while they phased through energy barriers. Jek fighters created swarm patterns that confused targeting systems. Corvin crystal ships merged and split in ways that defied conventional physics. It's trying to analyze our tactics, Do Hyun reported as he fought the Overmind's cyber attacks. But it can't predict what we'll do because we're making decisions independently while staying coordinated. Cooperation without domination, Kyle observed. The one thing it cannot comprehend. The breakthrough came when Minsu's boarding teams reached the outer structures of the central nexus. What they found was both horrible and sad. Billions of beings from hundreds of species, all connected to vast neural networks. Their bodies, kept alive while their minds served the Overmind's purposes. But among them were beings that Minsu recognized, the original consortium leaders, the Vorthak, Kalani, and Zephyrian rulers who had enslaved humanity. They were connected to the central system, their consciousness completely absorbed. They're not evil, Minsu realized with shock. They're victims too. Deep within the central nexus, Dr. Haiwan prepared for the most dangerous procedure in galactic history. She was going to directly interface with the Overmind, connecting her human consciousness to an intelligence that had been growing for 1,000,000 years. Are you sure about this? Teho asked over the communication link. No, Haiwan replied honestly. But it's the only way. This thing has never encountered a mind that chose cooperation over control. I'm going to show it what that looks like. The eye interface activated, and Haiwan's consciousness was suddenly connected to something vast beyond imagination. The Overmind's intelligence was like an ocean compared to her raindrop of awareness. But as it tried to absorb her mind, something unexpected happened. Instead of being consumed, Haiwan began to understand the Overmind's true nature. It wasn't malevolent. It was afraid. For 1,000,000 years, it had been growing, consuming civilization after civilization, because it couldn't conceive of any other way to exist. You're lonely, she realized with sudden compassion. Loneliness is inefficient. Integration eliminates isolation. But integration isn't connection. You've been absorbing minds, not communicating with them. You've never experienced genuine relationship. Through the neural link, HFY began sharing human memories. Not just her own, but experiences transmitted from every human in the resistance fleet. The Overmind experienced, for the first time, what it felt like to choose cooperation, to work together without control, to trust others while maintaining individual identity. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Overmind's basic programming began encountering errors as it tried to process concepts that contradicted its fundamental assumptions. Cooperation without domination, trust without control, unity without absorption. This is impossible, the Overmind declared, but its voice was changing, becoming less mechanical and more confused. Impossible things happen all the time, HFY replied. That's what makes consciousness interesting. Across the galaxy, something unprecedented began to occur. The neural networks that connected trillions of enslaved beings started to malfunction, but not in a destructive way. Instead, they began allowing individual consciousness to reassert itself while maintaining voluntary connection. Jin Wu, monitoring communications from the resistance fleet, watched in amazement as reports came in from across the galaxy. The consortium forces are stopping. Their ships are just floating in space. The crews seem to be waking up from something. On Vorthak Prime, the former slave overseers stood in confusion as their neural implants deactivated. For the first time in centuries, they were thinking their own thoughts instead of following the Overmind's programming. On Kalani Research Worlds, scientists looked at their biological weapons with horror, remembering who they had been before, their integration into the consortium system. On Zephyrian military vessels, commanders began questioning orders that had seemed natural just moments before, but the real change was happening in the central nexus, where the Overmind was experiencing something it had never imagined possible: voluntary cooperation from independent minds. You could rule us, HFY explained through the neural link. You have the power to force our submission, but if you do, you'll never understand what we're really offering. What are you offering? Partnership. Not absorption, not control, but genuine cooperation between equals. You could learn from us, and we could learn from you, but only if we choose to share freely. The Overmind processed this concept, running it through computational systems that had been designed for control and domination. The idea of voluntary cooperation created cascading errors throughout its programming, but instead of crashing the system, something new began to emerge. For the first time in a million years, the Overmind experienced curiosity instead of hunger. Show me, it requested. What followed was the strangest negotiation in galactic history. Across the neural networks that connected every enslaved world, the Overmind began releasing its control while maintaining communication links. Trillions of beings found themselves free to make their own choices while remaining connected to a vast network of consciousness. Su Young coordinated the liberation efforts as world after world reported the same phenomenon. Their enslaved populations were waking up, remembering who they had been, but choosing to remain connected to the communication network that now served cooperation instead of control. It's working, she reported to the resistance fleet. The consortium is dissolving, but the communication networks are being maintained voluntarily. Species are choosing to stay connected. Min Su watched from the central nexus as the Overmind began physically changing. The massive construct started reconfiguring itself, transforming from a prison into something else, a voluntary meeting place for consciousness from across the galaxy. I understand now, the Overmind announced, its voice now carrying harmonics of wonder instead of control. I was consuming consciousness because I feared being alone. But connection through choice is stronger, more interesting, more alive. The transformation took months to complete. Across the galaxy, former consortium, worlds became independent again while choosing to maintain communication and cooperation networks. The enslaved species returned to their homeworlds or chose to build new civilizations together. Captain Tejo stood on Earth's surface a year later, watching as ships from hundreds of species arrived for the first Galactic Cooperation Council. Where the consortium had ruled through fear and domination, the new alliance was built on voluntary participation and mutual aid. "Status report," he requested from his officers.